Adams defended a group of slaves in the Supreme Court case, the United States v. the Olmsted Africans. Adams successfully won the slaves their freedom and provided his legal services free of charge.
Free African Americans in the North played a huge role in the abolitionist movement. Many Northern blacks lived in the cities and faced discrimination and segregation, denied jobs, and attacked by white mobs. Northern blacks saw abolition as a step in the fight for civil rights. African Americans organized chapters of the American Anti-Slavery Society.
Peace and love, family. Welcome to The Hope, helping our people elevate. Whether it's your first time here or you're a returning viewer, thank you for being here. Today we embark on a journey through history to uncover the incredible stories of those who fought tirelessly to end one of humanity's greatest injustices, slavery. In this video, the fight to end slavery, the abolitionist movement, will explore the lives, struggle, and victories of abolitionists from around the world. These brave individuals and groups united across the border to challenge oppression and advocate for freedom and equality. So grab a seat and get ready to learn, reflect, and be inspired by the powers of resilience and the unyielding fight for justice as we discuss abolitionists across the globe. So let's dive in. Peace and love, family.
On behalf of Equiano, Call for Bay, you know what I'm saying? Jay, where you at? We're trying to help our people elevate. Hope, H-O-P-E. We're giving them hope. We doing what we gotta do, you know. Every day, one step at a time, man. We're gonna make it happen. Helping our people elevate. Yeah. Sometimes I practice focus, thought, and meditate. I'm trying to come with other ways to help our people elevate and seeking knowledge, make me levitate. The lifted mental state is what results from how we orchestrate. This for the family's sake. Let's self-reflect and self-evaluate. And every day, make sure the steps you take, you calculate. Receive a master's fate. I know I can't exist without the hate, but that's okay. I balance that with higher self today. Success is on this way, and after that, my flesh can pass away.
Okay, so family, before we dive into the meat of this thing, I always like to go into the language or sometimes the etymology or the origin of words, or just break down words before we go into the topic of discussion. And so we're going to start with the American Dictionary on the English language. Abolition is a noun, abolition, the act of abolitioning, or the state of being abolished, an annuling, abrogation, uttering destruction, as the abolition of law, decrees, ordinance, rights, customs, debts, etc. The application of this word to persons and things is now unusual or obsolete. To abolish persons, counted in senses, the language of good writers formerly is no longer legitimate. By the 17th to 19th century, slavery was the cornerstone of economic system in the Americas and to other parts of the world. Enslaved African labor fueled the production of cash crops such as sugar, cotton, and tobacco, driving the wealth of European colonial powers. This system was underpinned by dehumanization, violence, and exploitation on a massive scale. In response to the inhumanity and injustice of slavery, movements for abolition began to emerge. These efforts were driven by formerly enslaved individuals, activists, and allies who exposed the brutal realities of slavery. Publicized atrocities such as the Zong massacre helped galvanize opposition by revealing the depths of cruelty inherited in the system. The abolitionist movement ultimately sought to dismantle this oppressive institution and challenge the economic and moral foundation of slavery. And if y'all haven't, go check out that Zong massacre video that I did, where it talks about how they threw over 200-something people over the water and used them as an insurance policy. A few major figures: Frederick Douglass, a former slave, renowned orator, and writer advocating for abolition and equality; William Lloyd Garrison, publisher liberator advocating immediate emancipation; Harriet Tubman, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, exposing the cruelty of slavery; Sojourner Truth, former slave who spoke out for abolition and women's rights.
Imagine you lived in a time when owning another human being was legal and considered normal. You might wonder, how could such a practice exist? This is where the story of abolitionism begins, an important movement that aimed to end slavery.
The abolitionist movement was an organized effort to end the practice of slavery in the United States. The first leaders of the campaign, which took place from about 1830 to 1870, mimicked some of the same tactics British abolitionists had used to end slavery in Great Britain in the 1830s. Though it started as a movement with religious underpinning, abolitionism became a controversial political issue that divided much of the country. Supporters and critics often engaged in heated debates and violent, even deadly confrontations. The divisiveness and animosity fueled by the movement, along with other factors, led to the Civil War and ultimately the end of slavery in America. What is an abolitionist? An abolitionist, as the name implies, is a person who sought to abolish slavery during the 19th century. More specifically, these individuals sought the immediate and full emancipation of all enslaved people. More early abolitionists were white, religious Americans, but some of the most prominent leaders of the movement were also black men and women who had escaped from bondage. The abolitionists saw slavery as an abomination and an affliction on the United States, making it their goal to eradicate slave ownership. They sent petitions to Congress, ran for political office, and inundated people of the South with anti-slavery literature. These staunch activists wanted to abolish slavery completely, which differed from the idea of other groups like the Free Soil Party, which opposed the expansion of slavery in the United States territories in newly formed states such as Kansas.
Brown had certainly told many people over his lifetime that at the age of 12, he became a committed abolitionist when he witnessed the beating of a young black man his own age who had been enslaved, and never hesitated to share that story with others throughout his lifetime. When he was 37, he stood up in a church full of people and raised his right hand and said, "Here before God and these witnesses, I consecrate my life to the destruction of slavery."
How did abolitionism start? Opposition to slavery wasn't a new concept when abolitionism started. Since the inception of the Atlantic slave trade, which began in the 16th century, critics voiced their disapproval of the system. In an early effort to stop slavery, the American Colonization Society, founded in 1816, proposed the idea of freeing slaves and sending them back to Africa. This solution was thought to be a compromise between anti-slavery activists and slavery supporters. By 1860, nearly 12,000 African Americans had returned to Africa. Missouri Compromise. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, which allowed Missouri to become a slave state, further provoked anti-slavery sentiment in the North. The abolitionist movement began as a more organized, radical, and immediate effort to end slavery than earlier campaigns. It officially emerged around 1830. Historians believe ideas set forth during the religious movements known as the Second Great Awakening inspired abolitionists to rise up against slavery. This Protestant revival encouraged the concept of adopting renewal morals, which centered around the idea that all men were created equal in the eyes of God. Abolitionism started in states like New York and Massachusetts and quickly spread to other northern states.
Abolitionists, white and black, trained themselves to be professional agitators. They preached their anti-slavery message in open fields and churches, in cities and villages. But as their assault on slavery intensified, so did the backlash from northern whites.
Laws inflamed tensions. In 1850, Congress passed the controversial Fugitive Slave Act, which required all escaped enslaved people to be returned to their owners and American citizens to cooperate with their captors. Several years later, the Supreme Court ruled the Dred Scott decision that black people freed or enslaved didn't have any legal citizenship rights. Owners of enslaved people were also granted the right to take their enslaved workers to Western territories. These legal actions and court decisions sparked outrage among abolitionists. Famous abolitionists, many Americans, including free and formerly enslaved people, worked tirelessly to support the abolitionist movement. Some of the most famous abolitionists included William Lloyd Garrison, a very influential early abolitionist. Garrison started a publication called The Liberator, which supported the immediate freeing of all enslaved men and women. Frederick Douglass. Douglass escaped slavery himself and published a memoir titled Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. An instrumental figure in the abolitionist movement, he also supported women's suffrage. Harriet Beecher Stowe. Stowe was an author and abolitionist who was best known for her novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Susan B. Anthony. Anthony was an author, speaker, and women's rights activist who also supported the abolitionist movement. She is revered for her diligent effort in fighting for women's rights to vote. John Brown. Brown was a radical abolitionist who organized various raids and uprisings, including a famous raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Harriet Tubman. Tubman was a fugitive enslaved person and abolitionist who was known for helping escaped enslaved people reach the North via the Underground Railroad network. And then we have Sojourner Truth, best known for her speech, Ain't I a Woman? Truth was both an abolitionist and women's rights activist.
In 1785, Thomas Clarkson entered an essay contest. The question was, is it lawful to make slaves of others against their will? He entered the contest after learning about a horrifying massacre a few years earlier on the transatlantic slave trade. In November 1781, the captain of the British slave ship, the Zong, ordered his entire crew to throw 133 slaves overboard. Not a single person was tried for murder.
Rifts widened between North and South. As it gained momentum, the abolitionist movement caused increasing friction between states in the North and slave-owning South. Critics of the abolition argued that it contradicted the United States Constitution, which left the option of slavery up to individual states. Abolitionism was illegal in the South, and President Andrew Jackson banned the U.S. Postal Service for delivering any publications that supported the movement. In 1833, a white student at Lane Theological Seminary named Amos Dresser was publicly whipped in Nashville, Tennessee, for possessing abolitionist literature while traveling through the city.
On the clear moonlit night of November 7th, 1837, a mob surrounded a warehouse at Alton, Illinois, intent on destroying an anti-slavery newspaper run by the Reverend Elijah P. Lovejoy. When one of the mob moved to set the building on fire, Lovejoy, armed with a pistol, came out to stop him. The slavery men shot him dead. The news stunned the nation. A white man had been killed over black slavery.
Elijah Lovejoy. In 1837, a pro-slavery mob attacked a warehouse in Alton, Illinois, in an attempt to destroy abolitionist press materials. During the raid, they shot and killed newspaper editor and abolitionist Elijah Lovejoy. After the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 was passed, both pro- and anti-slavery groups inhabited the Kansas territory. In 1856, a pro-slavery group attacked the town of Lawrence, which was founded by abolitionists from Massachusetts. In retaliation, abolitionist John Brown organized a raid that killed 5 pro-slave settlers. Then, in 1859, Brown led 21 men to capture the United States Arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He and his followers were seized by a group of Marines and convicted of treason. Brown was hanged for his crime. Can you imagine what was going on with the people that were trying to free our people and those who were in bondage or prisoners of war during this time frame? Can you imagine what was going on?
Was the American Civil War fought because of slavery? The evidence is clear and overwhelming. Slavery was, by a wide margin, the single most important cause of the Civil War.
The Civil War and its aftermath. President Abraham Lincoln opposed slavery, but was cautious about fully supporting the more radical idea of abolitionists. As the power struggle between the North and the South reached its peak, the Civil War broke out in 1861. As the bloody war waged on, Lincoln issued his Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, calling for the freeing of enslaved people in areas of the rebellion. And in 1865, the Constitution was ratified to include the 13th Amendment, which officially abolished all forms of slavery in the United States. Though the abolitionist movement seemed to dissolve after the addition of the 13th Amendment, many historians argue that the effort didn't completely cease until the 1870 passage of the 15th Amendment. Though the abolitionist movement seemed to dissolve after the addition of the 13th Amendment, many historians argue that the effort didn't completely cease until 1870 passage of the 15th Amendment, which extended voting rights to black men. Meanwhile, the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, granted citizenship to all persons born and naturalized in the United States, including former enslaved people. So this should apply to our Hispanic family as well then. They should have citizenship. Instead of, we ain't even gonna get into that. When slavery officially ended, many prominent abolitionists turned their focus to women's rights issues. Historians believe that the experiences and lessons learned during the abolitionist movement paved the way for the leaders who were eventually successful in the women's suffrage movement. Abolitionist ideas and traditions also served as a model for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, which was formed in 1909. Thank you for tuning in to Hope, helping our people elevate. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe so we can keep sharing stories that inspire and uplift. As always, let's keep helping our people elevate. I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace and love, family.